Hello, I'm Rob. This is Zach. Welcome to another episode of Carnival of Randomness. And I want to start with a little story here. A big grizzly bear goes into a bar. Bartender looks at him. Wow, big grizzly bear. Want anything? The grizzly says, I'll have a gin and tonic. Bartender looks at him. Oh, that's fine. But what was with the big paws?
Oh,
Get
my
it?
God.
Now, I don't think any generation would like that joke.
No, that's not necessarily true, but...
No generation, but I wanted to talk about, it's amazing for the time we're on this planet.
If I may, I'm going to counter with that. A horse walks into a bar. The bartender says, why the long face? Anyway.
And so whoever's still listening out there.
Yeah, sorry our three
we're
listeners.
A little speck, I'm going to be philosophical, we're a little speck in the universe here. We've been around a short time, and massively many years, if you're a creationist, about 3,000, otherwise about 14 billion. And I was thinking about how things have changed so much just in the last 50-odd years of generations. So this is really a talk about the various decades and generations. Would you say it's the generation game?
I would say it's a generational game, yeah. Because just in my lifetime, the advancements in technology have been incredible.
It's amazing. It's called the quick thing, almost like a Highlander movie.
It kind of is. In a strange way, it kind of is. That technology has come...
And I'm worried because I've started to say to people, when I was your age...
Yeah, but... Well, it happens because it's not so much, I feel, the difference in age, but it's the difference in attitude and knowledge and ability to fit into the society.
Yeah.
So it's a lot different for kids, for younger generations, because the technology is just incredible, and they're so in tune with it.
And I heard, one of the things from like my dentist, I would be talking to him about, he'd be all excited. I'm going down to Atlanta for all the new technology, where before it was way back when, here's a bottle of whiskey, we're going to yank your teeth.
Yeah,
then was the good old
belt.
shot, which hurt like hell.
Yeah.
But then I've always heard, too, the advice about getting doctors now. Get a younger one, not because they may be more knowledgeable, because they're more up to date.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You have to be up to date, and with everything changing so quickly, it's really hard to stay on top of it, especially if you're maybe
a friend
an
of
older
mine
generation.
who started teaching and said one of the teachers still referred to like Latin America, South America wrong, because she'd been around for years, but that's what she was used to doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old trope. It's like we need to get updated history books, one that don't refer, to Nazi Germany as trouble ahead.
Yeah, that would be. Or I love looking at old maps as well. You're not there anymore.
Well, that's why when we had our Talking Smart with Fred and the Goose before they arrived, we were staring at the map and trying to date it. It's like, okay, well, it's pre-1995 because there's still a Czechoslovakia.
And then those two are plotting to conquer some of the countries and fuel them with whiskey and pipe smoke.
It sounds like a plan.
But we're going to go back maybe a little before. We may touch on the 50s. You'll see what I mean in a little bit. But the 1960s were well known as sort of a turbulent decade.
Very, very turbulent decade politically. I mean, you had the biggest thing, obviously, I would say the assassination of President Kennedy.
And I have a point about this as well. When I was in grade school and we were doing history, we're going through this, and my teacher actually was in the Peace Corps. She was in there because she was influenced by Kennedy. Yeah. And my mother would say, he had some kind of charisma. All I know is I saw his figure in Madame Tussauds. Yeah. A lot bigger than you think. But anyways, one of the things we did, and this was really surprising, our teacher said, go home to your parents. See if they have the issue of Life with Kennedy on it.
Ooh.
Everybody had it.
Yeah, I wonder if my parents do, because I remember asking them.
And I thought, what the heck? They're not going to have this. Yeah. Oh, you have the issue of Life?
Yeah. I remember asking them. They were both in school at the time, and they were let out early because of the assassination.
And the other thing about the assassination, this takes place, we had it started, of course, one of the inventions that came about, actually, I think it was in the 40s, the first one, was television.
Was it the 40s or
I
was
think
it a bit earlier?
Actually 40s or earlier. It was around 30s or 40s.
Well, back when it made its debut at the World's Fair.
Yeah.
So
then you would go to a bar maybe in the 50s. Or if you ever see the movie Avalon, they get a TV in the 50s. It's dead air. They're all staring at it. I think something's about to happen.
Yeah.
But this was one of the reasons when Lincoln was assassinated. How long do you think even before people knew?
Oh, it had to have been, in some cases, several days.
Yeah.
Maybe even up to a week, depending on where you
and
were.
Garfield, everybody else.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know about this type of thing, but it was, seeing this had to be one of those, I bet everybody, pick anybody of a certain age, say, where were you when Kennedy was shot?
Yeah, and they will tell you exactly where.
And it really changed everything. It was amazing. It was like America's Lost Innocence. We had the young president in Camelot. Maybe it wasn't Camelot when the history books came out, but
Yeah.
it was after the stodgy 50s and everything. We had this young, enthusiastic New Frontiers.
Exactly.
There was the idea, New Frontiers, let's go on. And then it was gone.
Yeah, taken away, and then it just... that's a fair statement, the loss of America's innocence.
That's when really, because a lot of people don't realize, from what I've read, the counterculture, it really, a lot of the influences swept over to the 70s. If you go back to the early 60s, look at what the most popular TV shows were. It was still very, I want to use small c conservative, very Ozzie and Harriet. It was really after Kennedy that everything started going to really...
Where couples on screen would share a bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you could see belly buttons on
How
TV.
different is it when, and we're jumping ahead for a second, but Ronald Reagan was the first person running for president who'd been divorced.
Well, exactly. That was huge because in the old days,
And
that
it was
a
the big
huge
thing
scandal.
when Bob Dole was trying to get a nomination in the 70s. He was divorced.
Yeah. Back then, it wouldn't have happened. But just less than a decade later, all of a sudden it was acceptable.
And the thing back in the day, and I'm going to say that term too many times probably, had they known about what Kennedy was doing behind the scenes...
Well, let's just leave it at that. We'll leave that for the speculation.
I found, to be honest, I read a book on him. I had not known tons about him, and I went back. I like to fill in my gaps, so I read books on presidents. Very good book on Eisenhower. But on Kennedy, I kind of liked him. But in a way, first stuff, he wasn't horrible. Obviously, there's going to be that he's a saint or something after that.
Well, I mean, I would say I watched a documentary not that long ago on Netflix called, I think it was a 4-parter called Bobby for President or Bobby
He would have
Kennedy
been
for
interesting.
President. And you look at the difference in the dynamic between Bobby and John. John was ultra charisma. I mean, captain person, almost cult of personality.
And the other thing about John...
But Bobby was smart.
The thing we don't know about John, this was the same thing in a little ways about FDR, because this is shocking to us now. People didn't know he even had polio. They would never show it.
Yeah.
But John F. Kennedy had tons of health problems.
Oh, yeah.
Tons and tons, but they kept this quiet. But Bobby would have been interesting.
But just looking at it, Bobby was so smart and so calculating. He wasn't very good with people. But, he was giving John a lot of advice.
Then I think Ted was like the Fredo of the Kennedy clan. The less said about him, the better, probably.
He killed
and this
that
isn't
woman.
a political discussion, but we're sort of framing it with politics.
Just so you know roughly when we're talking about, because the 60s was dominated, JFK, the assassination, and then Lyndon Johnson.
This was the good old days as we'll be flowing through of the Cold War. And Khrushchev taking his shoe off.
I will bury you!
And I'm sorry, the guy looks like a silent comedian to me.
Yeah. So, but then also, you look at, as you approach the 60s, or the end of the 60s, you had the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King, all the,
But we had it big
marches.
because you had the all AALBJ. How many men will you kill today for Vietnam War? But they had the thing with Barry Goldwater where they had the famous Daisy ad of an A-bomb blowing up while a girl's picking flowers. Because
I remember
this was
seeing
very big in these days. We had a red under your bed. We're just getting out of McCarthyism.
Man, that was I wasn't alive for that, but what a turbulent period to read about.
Whereas like Eric Idle of Monty Python said it was safe to believe those views in the U.S. and not have to live it. And we had Castro, the Bay of Pigs, and everything.
Bay of Pigs, and the beginning of the embargo in Cuba. What was that, 1959 was the Bay of Pigs? Good
no,
God.
it had to be 61 because Kennedy was president. Yeah, it was because it was Kennedy.
What am I thinking of? Oh, no. 59 is when Castro took power. Sorry.
Yeah. because he was a failed baseball player.
Yeah.
Had somebody hard signed him as a
Well,
team.
there's that. Yeah, I mean, the Yankees, I believe.
But this is not, again, doing
him.
this political. It's not really political, but we're just bringing up the names because how could we forget them?
Yeah, because, don't forget, he was in power for a long time.
But then we get to more where we start coming about soon, us like coming into being.
Yeah.
And we had, of course, the moon landing in Richard Nixon.
Yeah, the moon landing in 1969, July of 1969, if I'm not mistaken. Then Nixon as president, the Watergate incident in 74.
And a lot of Nixon is an interesting character. When he died, there was a picture of him doing his little Nixon victory thing
the peace
at
thing.
St. Peter's gates.
Yeah.
And St. Peter said, this is going to take a while.
But he did a lot more good than people want to give him credit for. Trade relations with China, the ICBM treaty, the EPA forcing desegregation of the
A lot of
southern
people do
schools.
not remember that Nixon was very big desegregator.
Yeah, and I've gotten into arguments with people like, well, no, it was Lyndon Johnson. No, Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, but he didn't really enforce it. He just signed it.
He basically did it for politics to get
It was
votes. That's all it was.
It was a political vote grab, but Nixon was the one that pushed it and made them do it. But in any event,
One thing I remember from the 70s, too, is, for me, and I think every generation will say this, I thought the fashions, if you go back,
Oh, my
pretty.
God.
Go back. I remember, I can pick this out from an episode of Starsky and Hutch. They're partying.
lapels so wide you could kill a man with them.
Oh, my goodness. It was just horrible all the way around. I always used to say I did not want to be born then because I didn't want to dress that way.
Yeah, and I wasn't born then, so I missed the disco era. And
That's the other thing I was going to say is this was the era, to me, the 70s, of very, very bad music.
I think, what was it?
The 60s had really good music. The 50s had really good music. By the time we had the 70s, we had schlock.
Well, to be fair, there were some pretty funny disco songs. Kung Fu Fighting.
For me, one of the ones that got me, still does, I find it really, really creepy, was Muskrat Love.
Yeah, that's a little odd.
Listen to the lyrics
That's
sometimes.
okay.
But that was the days of things like The Night Chicago Died, Wildfire, all that, Tin Man, and, of course, Disco, which was a little later.
Yeah, that was
Disco
more like...
Duck, huh?
Oh, I love that
Convoy.
song. Yep.
Junk Food Junkie was another one.
Yeah.
And corporate rock, they used to say that was when we had all these faceless bands come in.
You leave the monkeys alone.
They were
60s more.
sort of, but they were put together. They were like our first Milli Vanilli.
They were the first boy band, as it were.
They were put together, obviously, to rip off the Beatles.
Yeah.
And they actually, one of the reasons for Batman going off the air was supposedly that people jumped from the Munsters to Batman to the Monkees.
That would do
That's
it.
a theory, though. That's one of those conspiracy theories we're going to have to do some other time.
Yeah.
And one of the ironies was having Gerald Ford be known for Chevy Chase, too, doing it. It happened in real life, though, as Enormous Klutz. Because this is interesting if you don't know his background.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's he was, I should say, an All-American football player, a center at the University of Michigan, a highly touted, excellent football player.
Yeah.
And that's, you have to be pretty coordinated, but he will forever be, the skiing incident?
Yeah, he fell off a plane.
Fell off a plane, fell down the stairs, but he was just one of those jovial guys. Hello, everybody.
That's what he was.
I'm Jerry, and I'll be your president today.
He was literally one of these guys. He became president. Why? Because he could be. Because what happened with Nixon was when they had the Watergate, Spiro Agnew got in all his trouble, whichever that was.
Well, that's how, don't forget, Gerald Ford, the only man to be vice president and president without ever having won an election.
The story goes, they're looking around to find a vice president now. I guess Sam Rayburn, Foghorn Leghorn was based on him. He was the senator out of North Carolina.
Yep.
But Nixon was, let's just put it this way, Nixon was not very popular with everybody at the time.
Not after the Kennedy election.
And what happened was, they're looking for a vice president. He wanted John Connally, who just recently was a Democrat. He was in the car going back to Kennedy, governor of Texas.
Yeah.
And they figured they'd never be able to pass him. One of the guys that came up was George H.W. Bush.
Really? Back then? I didn't know
Because he had been ambassador to China, director of the CIA. And they were looking around, but then they thought Jerry Ford, because everybody liked Jerry Ford.
Yeah, because he
was a congressman out of Michigan. He was a minority leader, and he was just renowned as a nice guy.
That's the thing. He was just, a genial human
So he
being.
was the Harry Anderson on Night Court of...
Yeah.
Why was he there? Because he was there.
Why was he? How did he become
He
vice
had
president?
plotted on retiring. He became vice president. Then he became president.
Yeah, and he became vice president after Agnew resigned.
Yeah, then when Nixon
And then when Nixon resigned, he took over as president, finished out his term. I don't think he even sought re-election.
Yes, he did.
Oh, he did?
He had a challenge from Reagan in the primaries. It was like the first one. But he was sort of one of those guys. I don't even grade him because how can you really?
Yeah, he was put in a weird situation where nothing of his presidency was.
And there's all these theories. One of them was that if he kept Nelson Rockefeller as his vice president, because he was still popular with Kerry, New York, because he went to Bob Dole afterwards.
Bob Dole.
If he didn't pardon Nixon, and there's a lot of things we're never going to know. He claimed it was just to heal the country. He had to move on.
Right.
And who knows?
That's speculation at this point.
But I think about actually Saturday Night Live popping up then, too.
Well, I remember because I never saw Saturday Night Live because by the time I started watching it, it was garbage. But I just remember because a Christmas present I got my father, it was a signed Mike Royko book, The Billy Goat Tavern. Yeah. You know, it just reminds you of the great Saturday Night Live. Cheeseburger, chips, Pepsi, no Coke, Pepsi only.
A lot of people, this is a misnomer I want to point out here. A lot of people used to take pride in that it was based on Nick Tahoe's here, which is total bull. It was based on those things in Chicago.
Yeah. It was
those Greek stories.
Yeah, the Billy Goat Tavern. Yeah. You know, cheeseburger, cheap, Pepsi.
No Coke.
Only Pepsi.
Which is funny. That's why I think the legend came up because Tao was at Pepsi.
Yeah, that was John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, right?
Yeah. Cheeseburger. Then they repeated.
Yeah, cheeseburger.
But one of the things we had, too, then is a little bit of, like, cultural phenomenon. Like, Saturday Night Live, I remember that was it was big in the day. That was like an event. People would stay home.
People would stay home for it.
Talk sports before. Monday Night Football was like a national holiday.
It was king.
On Mondays. People would...
Networks realized that they could not air. This was when
I was very, very young. My dad would let me stay up through the highlights of it because it was so big.
Well, and that was what people didn't realize is that the networks back in the day knew that they could not air anything on Monday night during football season because they get buried.
And Howard Cosell, good, bad, whatever, he was a character. He would make it sound... You would have 2 0-10 teams. You would make it sound like a gladiatorial contest that the fate of the universe depended on it.
This is Howard Cosell telling you what I need you to believe.
All of you want laughs, look up one on YouTube still when he was drunk and puked in the booth.
Oh, God.
I guess it was an Eagles game, and I guess they said he threw up in the booth. Dandy Don said he had flu. He went home.
Oh, Meredith had to cover for him?
Yes.
Oh,
and they had, I guess what made it was there was a scene, it was an Oilers game, and it was an ad lib by Dandy Don where they went to him at the end of the game and he gave him the finger, and he said he's saying we're number one.
Yeah.
And it was the scene where Joe Namath was on the field on his knees, and that made it. But they were big, and that's when they say, because you go back to the 60s, we talked about TV before.
Yeah.
That was all fun still and everything. The 70s when they said they started having quote-unquote serious television.
It began to get a little more real. And it wasn't just the Leave It to Beaver type stuff from the 50s.
I've never seen it, but supposedly there was an episode of Maude where she has an abortion.
Well, there was that, the episode of All in the Family.
With
where
the rape.
The rape, and I think the one time Archie hit Edith.
I don't remember that.
And then she got mad at him and I've heard rumor that it might be false, but I don't know.
And they started bringing in Newhart, all the serious TV.
Yeah.
Are they so-called serious? Well, they still have the Brady Bunch, Partridge Family.
Yeah, with their AstroTurf lawn and their no bathroom in their house.
Which is weird. I never watched the Partridge Family, just
I never
the Brady
did either.
Bunch.
I watched it here and there on reruns, obviously.
That's why I saw reruns and everything.
But since you were around in the 70s, what's the one thing
you
remember?
I was not, but I remember people my cousin Rob was.
Oh, please. Well, ask him next time you see him. About the gas lines.
I was an only twin.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that the other day. But, the gas lines. Because I was, full disclosure, people, born in 1982. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I have
1982.
I have your records in my file cabinet.
We had the thing, this was OPEC, the oil embargoes. Mm-hmm. And one of the other big things was, I guess, Jerry Ford would not bail New York out when they ran out of power. There's a big thing, if you ever see the movie Summer of Sam or something like that, that was when New York had the big heat wave and the power outages.
Oh,
so there's a big headline, Ford in New York dropped dead. Because he wouldn't do a federal bailout. But what happened was that was when we got OPEC really ticked at us.
And they shut everything down.
And these were the days of go for gas around the block.
Yeah.
Now, some irony about that is, I don't know what gas prices were then, but you would love them now.
Yeah. I remember when I started driving, gas was 89 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
And this was in 1998?
Yeah, and shocker, just go back to any movie. Pick a movie from the 80s, even 90s. If they show the character by a gas station.
Yeah, it's like 25 cents.
Yeah. We had Harry Davis. This is a guy who was from Buffalo. He was running for a congressional seat. He was in a primary. He was by my house. He paid for $1.50 gas. Now, if you were in the 70s, gas crisis, $1.50, I'm not paying that.
Yeah, you would.
We had a line. I'm walking my dog. There's a line down Ridge Road. You would swear the Beatles came back. We were putting on a concert.
Yeah.
And I was saying, you're going to run out of gas before you go get gas.
Right. And now $1.50, you would slap a child for $1.50 gas.
And again, we have to go back. I don't think I could say this enough still. It's going to play again how the Cold War played out. We had SALT and SALT 1, SALT 1, SALT 2.
Oh, here, let's say, how did the Cold War play out? It didn't happen. It was just what was it? It's a giant pissing contest between the United States and the Soviet Union. How it ended, the Soviet Union crumbled.
Basically, we can get into theories in the 80s about this.
Well, yeah.
But we could save that for then, or say a little bit about now. Everybody will say, so-and-so won the Cold War, so-and-so. There is a thing, if you read a lot of history, they looked at like Reagan and Bush as a couple of cowboys. This was in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
But the true fact is their own system.
Yeah. Communism
There's
is
a saying,
doomed.
it died because of bad Bulgarian shoes.
Well.
But their own economy crumbled.
That's the thing.
That's what happened.
And communism as a system is doomed to fail.
It was
period.
a third world country with a lot of big weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it was.
And it would have happened, because people want to give Reagan all the credit in the world for destroying the evil Soviet Union. It would have happened no matter who was president.
But it's one of those things where we had back then, we had the enemy.
Yeah.
They were all the bad guys. I remember like Leonid Brezhnev, SALT 1, SALT 2, Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And I remember the peace accords from those days with Sadat and Begin. Then I remember Camp David.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So one thing that sticks out, a lot of bad economy. And one of the things that stuck out during the Carter years was it was always Jimmy Who. Jimmy Who.
Jimmy who?
That's what they would say, Jimmy Who. And he was not Doctor Who, but when he was running for president.
I was going to say,
he was like a one-term...
Doesn't Jimmy Who design shoes?
Huh.
Oh, it's Jimmy Chew.
Oh.
No, I'm serious.
Oh, yeah, now I remember. But I remember that vaguely was Jimmy Who, because nobody really knew. He was a one-time governor from Georgia.
Yeah.
He was a peanut farmer.
Yeah, he was Mr. Peanut.
He was evangelical or whatever they were then. But one of the things that came out that's sort of ironic during the Carter years, there was a lot of revival of, first of all, in the 50s, not the 70s, there was a big revival of 1950s culture. Sha-na-na, a lot of 50s nostalgia.
Bowser.
Yeah. Robert Gordon, a lot of this stuff, and that's where you got movies like American Graffiti.
Oh, I loved that movie.
And everybody wanted to go back to the 50s, and I suppose it's natural, because if you were a kid in the 50s...
Wasn't that around the time Grease came out?
Yes.
Okay.
Which, if you look at the storyline, is basically stupid.
Oh, it's terrible.
And the other theory is Sandy drowned, and it's her dream. But what's worse than Grease?
Grease 2.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. But that's when the play came out. But this was all this 1950s nostalgia. And I could see that because if you were growing up in the 50s.
And you see what's happening now with the economy in the tank. You yearn for that simpler
There's a big saying that there was a lot of boomer angst in the 70s. Burt Reynolds theorized he was popular because he played characters who were aging but still having fun.
Right.
Like the Bandit. He was the world's biggest show-off. He was like a guy around the fort. And I never knew his name was Bo Darville until a couple of years ago. Very
Bo
southern
Darville.
name, Bo Darville.
I can't remember the snowman's name, though.
Cletus Snow.
That's right, Cletus Snow.
And I guess, aren't you Hank Snow?
Yeah, no.
But no, you're not Hank Snow. And his dog, Fred. But the other one, there's a movie called Lifeguard that's out. And I guess Burt Reynolds was supposed to be in it. He turned it down. He would have been perfect. Sam Elliott's in it. It's about a guy who's like 33. He's going to his 15-year reunion. He's still a lifeguard. And everybody's saying, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do with your life? And he almost becomes a car salesman, but he stays on as a lifeguard. And a lot of this, not to get weird and deep, but it was boomer angst about growing up.
Well, and that's definitely something that threw back to the nostalgia of their childhoods.
Yeah.
But then the one thing I've always seen, now we're getting into the 70s, this was really, I think, one of the big booms in the technology.
Yes.
I mean, you saw a lot of things that we have today.
Wasn't the first, big computer, it was like out of sci-fi, like a MyTac or something, and it was, bigger than this room?
It would need a room the size of a warehouse to house this thing, and it had the computing power of not much.
Yeah.
I mean, most calculator watches from the 90s had more computing
Because
power.
I remember
than the
my
first
first computers were hilarious. They were in the 70s. I remember getting like an Apple and then
I
a
just
Mac.
say the Apple 128.
And actually, one of the things that came into being in the 70s was it Pong?
Well, there was Pong. I wrote things down. In 72, there was the Magnavox Odyssey. That was the first commercially available home video gaming system.
We talked about this on Christmas. I got one as a present. I actually enjoyed it, but I'd never heard of it then.
Yeah, that was the first one, the Magnavox Odyssey.
But I remember we rented literally. My uncle owned Clover Pools. We borrowed Pong from.
Yeah, but
and
there
now
was the Pong system.
Anybody these days would be snoring. We literally played the little Pong thing for hours.
Because there was nothing else. That was the first of its kind.
And what stands out for me, too, is like the little bar bowling games and the hockey game, which I remember because I always bonged my fingers.
Yeah, because the big metal disc.
What do they call them now?
I think they're shuffleboard now.
But they were, I think they were the air hockey.
Yeah, air hockey. Yeah.
But I used to bang my fingers all the time in foosball. And what really came about then was we started to see the advent of the arcade games. And I can point to this, and I know why, because I used to go, my parents bowled. So I would go down there, and I would do two things. I would have people I would trade hockey stickers with for books.
Oh,
I would do that.
Books. I remember those.
I would do that, and I also would play video games, because they started having them in pinball, because we had pinball. It was huge.
Pinball, yeah. But I remember that.
But then the first video games started creeping in.
Yeah,
the
big ass arcade cabinets that a lot of that sadly really don't exist
but
much
going
anymore.
to computers, we would have these big things, and what the heck would they even do?
Yeah, they didn't do much. I mean, because everything you had to do was user defined. So it's like the old DOS system, where you had to input the commands for the computer to do so. It was basically just the green screen with the blinking cursor.
And I fondly remember, though, and we talked about this with our great Grease Creeper friend Tommy a little bit, the school games.
Yes.
Which probably had to be in the 80s because
I'd say 80s.
And they were fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed them. There's all kinds of different kinds.
Oh, yeah.
But could think about people who are so visually into it now. And that's one of the things we have to laugh about. That popped in my head because I just saw Aquaman. And it didn't go swimmingly, but it wasn't horrible. But just go back, do something for us if you want. We don't give homework here because we never did our homework. But check out like a Marvel TV, like the Incredible Hulk or Spider-Man from the 70s. Check out the effects in some of these things. Or like even in a Star Trek movie from the 80s. Think of the effects now.
Actually, I was listening to Adam Carolla was talking about this on another podcast. I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast. But he was talking about movie effects and how them growing up in the 70s, you saw the terrible effects movies because it was being perfected under your watch.
Yeah.
And now it's seamless now.
Well, the story goes with George Lucas, he literally waited to do those Star Wars sequels because he had to wait for technology to catch up. But one of the things I was going to say, when I grew up, a little before you, just a little before.
Not much.
But what happened was, in those days, choices were very, very limited.
That's the thing.
For you growing up with TV, whenever you had, how many channels did you have?
Oh, Jesus. I don't even... Oh.
Will you stop asking him?
No, he's going to help me. I honestly don't remember. There was a good amount of channels, though. But I do remember growing up, we had the converter box.
Did you have the bunny ears?
We had a bunny ears on the one TV, but I remember the converter box.
I use bunny ears. There's a lot of people say rabbit ears.
Yeah, we had the converter box, and then we had the VCR with the pop-up thing, and the remote was attached by a cord.
Literally, we had the three channels, of course. We had CBS, NBC, ABC.
Yeah.
We had WXXI, which for us was a savior in those days because we had nothing else. Well, and then you would have the rabbit ears. You would try to get Syracuse.
Well, that's why when I had the rabbit ears, we had actually four channels. We had Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 11, Channel 53, which was the Fox affiliate.
We would get the Buffalo channels.
And then WQED, which was PBS.
And we'd have all like those morning, we had like Commander Tom out of Buffalo or Ranger Bob and those weird little shows. And then when cable popped up,
it was basic.
You had HBO and a couple like 11, a couple
MTV
local channels.
back when they actually played music.
That was the thing too. MTV, there's been a lot of sayings that MTV, that was the beginning and the end of music because it became all the pretty boys.
What was it? Video killed the radio star. That was the first song they played.
But they actually, the Bungles. And
the Cincinnati Bungles?
I was waiting for that one. I knew you were going to say that. But that was the theory because it became all... In the 70s, people will argue again. Some people will go back. Our friends, the Moondogs, might have said that like the Allman Brothers and those really saved rock because they were more pure. Mm. But we had all the other corporate rock bands. But then in the 80s, the advent of MTV...
And it became something
We had all the hair bands... We had all...
That was, glam metal?
Glam metal, hair bands. We had all those, they called them the new romantics, like Duran. Where literally, you would do videos before the album. Mm-hmm. That's what mattered.
Yeah, it was marketing. It wasn't so much for the music. It was just getting your name out there.
And it really was considered, at the time, that video did kill the radio star.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, that was the first song they ever played on MTV.
And you would imagine, like, say, like a Bob Dylan, a Tom Waits, or anybody, if they came out in the visual era, they weren't established already.
Yeah.
How those guys would go off.
Well, Bob Dylan especially.
Obviously, or even like the Stones.
Yeah, it just wouldn't have worked.
Because I remember my econ professor, who was a Brit, always saying, well, Mick Jagger, he gets all these models. He's pug ugly.
He really is. You know, they're talented.
Like Gene Simmons would say about that. This ugly guy, when he was touring with Rush, this ugly guy gets all these women every night. These guys are watching television.
Mm-hmm. And that was a game changer. But you know what else? I'm just doing my digging. In the 70s, there was a lot of stuff I didn't know happened way back. The first mobile phone call.
Oh.
1973.
Wow.
But from Motorola.
You remember the rotors of the phone?
Oh, yeah. My grandfather always had the rotary phone. I remember when the hashtag was called a pound sign.
Yeah. That one. And the other thing is, it can be interesting if you look through the years and watch it with movies, because I'll go to a movie, The Departed. One of the big plot points about the movie The Departed is these gangsters use cell phones a lot. But you go back, say, 70s, 60s, and actually Touch of Evil, this one movie in the 50s, stands out to me. One of the whole things is they're looking for people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to try to call him and get him. He's not there. They
so
can't
you would have to go to
him.
a payphone, or back in those days, they had the police boxes.
Yeah.
On the telephone poles.
And you would go around, and a lot of it was, well, we're looking for him. We're looking for him. We don't know where he is.
You know, even when I was growing up, the first cell phones came out. They were still pretty big. I don't really remember the bricks or the ones you had to have to carry the battery over a shoulder strap. But when I was in high school, if somebody had a cell phone, we would make fun of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're waiting for a call from the Pope? Can't be away from the phone that long?
And how did things change? Years ago for the holidays, I would make a point of going through on Christmas Eve and making tons of phone calls after going Christmas shopping, wishing Merry Christmas to everybody. We do talk for a while.
Yeah.
I've got one friend who I don't see, my friend Holly. We never see each other every year. She has Lyme disease. She has some health problems. We spend one day, we got it in. Literally, we'll talk on the phone from around 9 until the phone dies.
Yeah.
But it's the only person I really call.
Yeah.
That's it. Everybody's text,
email, message.
Email.
Yeah, messengers.
Or it's, okay, this doesn't work. Hi, where are we meeting?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We become, I think, almost dependent on technology. And
what about the art of conversation? Because I could say going out for dinner sometimes. I've seen people texting each other while they're at dinner.
While they're sitting at a table.
How does that happen at the dinner table? Like if you have family holidays, you see that. I've seen people complain about that.
There's really no phones. I was just home for Christmas Eve dinner at my aunt's house.
Are you checking your phone while you're listening to this?
No, yeah, I'll bet you people checking phones while they're listening to this. Or, no, they're listening on their phones.
Yeah, amazing. And wasn't the thing, I think Fred said the thing that he yelled at somebody as a joke in his class because he wasn't on a phone?
Yeah. Get on your phone, son.
That was the other thing for me growing up. We had things like construction paper, and we did not have computers at all.
God, I remember construction
My first
paper.
computer course was in high school, and I drew a pumpkin. That was the extent. The extent of that class was we tried to debate what clothes our teacher would wear because he seemed like he wore the same clothes every week. And then basically connect the dots and draw something, and we drew a pumpkin for the display. That was it.
I remember we had a computer lab, but it was just Macs, and I just remember playing Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
For hours, every school year. We would just go down to the lab during free periods or stay after school and just play Oregon Trail because We didn't really have many computers at home.
My first printer printed out like orange and yellow and everything.
With
bounced,
with the old removable
it would do the
tabs on the side, yeah.
But we go into the 80s, and I'm going to say one thing that you might not remember that was interesting about Reagan. Do you know what the Reagans were?
What?
They were jelly beans.
Oh, yeah, that's
because
right.
I guess Reagan was renowned for...
Always had a dish of jelly beans on the desk in the Oval Office,
The story goes, always wore a suit and tie. After hours, he would wear sweatpants and gobble jelly beans down.
Well, he was an actor, so just
I have a point.
that.
I did not like brown suits, and he always to wear brown suits.
Brown suits on anybody is just not good.
But he brought in the brown suit again, because I remember actually one of the funny things I have on, I'm embarrassed, I wore it in high school, I had a Don Johnson Miami Vice jacket.
Oh, God, really?
Because remember 80s fashions, I don't know what we can
Yeah,
say
they were...
about...
Okay, here, I'll sum it up. Neon.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I did the Don Johnson. I had hair then. Don Johnson with the spiked hair and all this horrible stuff.
Then you found out what a dick Don Johnson is.
Yeah. But
come at me, Don Johnson.
That was Miami Vice, but it was huge for a little while.
Yeah.
So that was different. And we also had, did you watch that 70s and 80s show? I never watched those.
I watched that 70s show.
How was it accurate at all, do you think?
I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 70s. I didn't watch that 80s show. I watched one episode and realized it was garbage. So
we had all the Madonna dressing, all that stuff.
I would think that 70s show was pretty accurate.
But one of the big things with us, and I can remember from school, is when the Challenger blew up.
Yeah, was it 86?
Yeah.
So I would have been 4 years old. That was actually the same year Halley's Comet was around.
Because I remember we were going to class. I was by my locker. Mrs. Fry, our history teacher, was coming out talking about this. And I wondered what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
And then we heard the Challenger blew up.
I was just a youngster, but I do. And it was a weird year. You had the Challenger, the 86 Mets, and Halley's Comet.
Iran-Contra, too.
Iran-Contra was right around there. 86, 87.
Ollie North went to Brockport for a while. Do you know that?
Yes,
he's from upstate New York.
Yeah, I did know that he spent some time at Brockport, among other places.
But also, this was the Cold War still.
Yep, still the Cold War. Guess what?
Reagan did his evil empire speech. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Tear Down, this was Tear Down the Wall.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Yeah, that one.
That one, too. And we had Gorby, of course, come about.
Yep, good old Gorby with the thing.
Because for a while,
with the schmutz on his head.
For a while, the Soviet leaders were dropping like flies.
Yeah, they weren't lasting real long, were they?
And the other thing I actually remember was the Pope. Because that was like my first Pope I really remember.
Who was that, John Paul?
Yeah.
The second?
Because the first John Paul didn't last very long.
Oh, no, he was a couple months?
Yeah.
And then he
died?
Then
they had the next Karl Wojtyla, who was the first non-Italian Pope in centuries.
Long time.
So he came about, and I just remember him because they talked about him as a young, and he was, I think, 60-something. This was a younger Pope. He played tennis.
Yeah.
And I remember him coming about because he was around a long time.
Up until, when did he die?
Like 25 or, because I think.
Because I remember being in Italy in 1995.
I think it was 2005.
He was still there. Yeah. And he was actually, he could still lift up the Pope.
Rumors were the Goose was in contention.
I would have voted for Pope Goose.
A Pope Smike Vokey.
Pope Goose. I'd vote for him.
Man, one of his Jesuits got in, so I suppose. After Peanut Butter the 16th there.
Ooh.
He got in, whatever. He was a France. I don't know what
Pope
he was.
Palpatine?
Yeah.
Palpatine?
Everybody makes fun of him, but.
He looks like. Chosen by God, resigns.
And that was like, I remember the old Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan stuff back then in the 80s.
Yeah.
And we had a burst of, I don't know if you remember, we had a really big burst of patriotism back then again, especially with the 84 election. I thought of George Orwell. You were young. And I remember the whole stuff about that's when all the Rambo, all the jingoism. But of course, Rocky wins the Cold War himself by beating up Ivan Drago.
Yeah, Rocky kills or beats up Drago, and he single-handedly won the Cold War, just like back in the 40s. John Wayne won World War II.
Oh, of course, even though he wasn't even in the Army.
No.
And it goes to that also, where we also had all the MIA stuff about Vietnam, because it was all this. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stories that there weren't any POWs.
And that's
Ross Perot was very, very big. This is how actually he first came about. There's a movie about it, even one of those. But he got conned by people who were looking for them and just stealing his money. But it was very big patriotic time at the time.
It started to become that, and that was really when the Vietnam veterans started to finally be able to get the respect and help that they deserved.
And we had Grenada and the Falklands. We had Lebanon.
Yeah, Lebanon, and then
the Achille Lauro.
Later on, you had, Desert Storm in the late 80s?
Yeah,
I remember that one.
But this was for Reagan still, and I just remember the wave of patriotism that was going around at the time.
Right.
And I think that's really when all those crazy evangelical things like the 700 Club came about, too.
Oh, my.
Because we started to have, like, Pat Robertson with the End of the World.
Pat Robertson.
And I think more the NWO is not the New World Order, but the good old wrestling faction.
Yeah. Oh, my.
But that was Pat Robertson. You're probably glad you missed that.
I remember seeing it here and there, but I would never watch it because... as a kid, it was boring because all they were doing was talking.
And I don't want to touch this one a little bit. I never watched it. I'm proud of that. But, of course, you never watched it, thank goodness. But The Cosby Show.
No.
And we were right.
Yep, a lot of people were right about him for a long time.
He's gone now. But I remember 80s TV like that. What I remember is Newhart. Night Court. Which is more toward the 90s a little bit.
I remember Married with Children because that was really what launched the Fox
And I was going to say, that was the thing, talking about TV, that was a big thing. I remember the first time Fox appeared here, we had a fourth channel.
Yeah.
And I remember they showed Neil Simon's The Odd Couple. They had the Sunday Funnies. Mm-hmm. And I remember some of the shows they had on, The Adventures of Beans Baxter, Get a Life.
I don't even remember.
Get a Life with this show. It's on DVD now. It had Chris Elliott on as a 30-something-year-old paperboy who lives in his parents' garage.
I'm going to have to find that one. I've never heard of it. I'll check it out in the library.
It's in the library.
So I won't pay for it. I'll go to the library.
But Married with Children was the breakout show.
That was the one that really launched the quote-unquote reputation of Fox as being, the toilet humor
And network. You think how things changed then, what they got away with.
Oh, God, yeah.
By the time there.
Yeah.
Because you think then the boundaries were coming down a little bit.
Yeah, implying that their daughter was sleeping around with everybody.
Yeah.
And talking about their sex life and flushing toilets and going to the nudie bar.
Because they were having in the 70s, again, with TV, they were having like the first openly gay characters. Started popping up.
Was that when it was?
A few of them. There were a few of them. Plus we had like Paul Lynde.
Hello,
and
how are
George Gobel.
How are you?
But they just, what it was, they never said anything.
Well, everybody kind of knew.
Because we had the Culture come out with all the dance studios and everything. And everybody knew, but nobody said anything.
Everybody knew, but nobody said anything.
Except for the real uptight crowds and stuff, obviously.
We don't.
But what are your first memories then when you were hatched? Do you remember George Bush? The Elder.
Yeah, Bush the Elder, the no new taxes thing. But
that's how to sink yourself right there.
Yeah,
I'll say the one thing about George Bush.
They actually made jokes about that on cartoons I watched. It was Tiny Toon Adventure, Animaniacs.
Yeah,
and they yanked his lip down, and it said "no new taxes" on his lip.
One of the things about George Bush, this will probably never happen in our lifetime again. Maybe Sarah Palin did it, but there was a big thing where the vice president became an issue for the campaign because Dan Quayle. It was who the heck was Dan Quayle?
The potato incident. Yeah, I remember that very well. Just
when I was in D.C., they had books with Dan Quayle. It was a Cupid doll.
Yeah.
But the sad part is, I remember hearing later about his kids having to see all this.
Yeah, and it's not like he was a jerk. He was just kind of slow.
Yeah, and
not even slow, just dull.
And the thing about him is, I think some of it stuck because I don't think he was that bright.
No, he really wasn't.
And we won't get into the reasons why he picked him, but this was like the big thing where you would see ads where you'd see Dukakis in small print and Benson.
Yeah.
And then you would see Bush in big print Quayle.
Bush
And
Quayle.
we all know the "You're no John Kennedy" quote that Lloyd Benson used on him. Which, if you look at it, was not fair because all he said was he was about the same age as John Kennedy.
Yeah.
Which was true.
Yeah, that's.
And then it's been said John Kennedy wasn't even John Kennedy, so.
Yeah, it was taken out of
context. And I do
like
remember Reagan's assassination attempt. I remember seeing it.
I definitely didn't see it, but I remember reading about. What year was that?
It was 81. It was literally almost.
Yeah, obviously I didn't see it.
And one of the other big things that stands out was Al Haig's "I'm in charge" thing about that.
Oh yeah.
And there was all these things about how the Iranians were going to assassinate everybody during the holidays, and nothing happened or whatever.
Was that when? Or no, was that Bush that had to go in for surgery, so they had to swear in the vice president for a couple hours?
That was Reagan. Then it was, I guess, Bush needed surgery on his pinky or something.
No, it was his middle finger.
He said, "Don't tempt me."
Yeah.
And Reagan had the big thing about for the debate, we're going to send the nukes.
Yeah.
But then for George Bush, was that sort of when you became aware?
I think that's pretty much when I became aware of what was going on in the world. So that would be, 1989?
89 to 93.
So I would be 7 years old. Yeah, now I'm starting to become more aware of the
that
world
was a big transition time, I think, because that's when really the Cold War, the USSR was crumbling.
The Soviet Union fell in, the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, right?
Yeah.
The Soviet
89 or 90, around there.
I think 89. The Soviet Union collapsed in 91, and that's when it broke apart.
And I remember...
And that's when Europe, all of a sudden, the landscape of Europe changed. You know, you have countries that were never there that are there now, and then Yugoslavia was there, and then
Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia became 2 countries, and then Yugoslavia became 6 countries. And
I remember one of the things, everybody and their mother was at the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Where's Zaire?
Where is it now?
Exactly. But
what is it, the Congo now?
The Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Rhodesia was in that was the 70s, but now of course we have Western Sudan.
South Sudan and Sudan.
Still Abdullah the Butcher, I guess. He's too old to want to be president.
Yeah, but you were saying that everybody was at the Berlin Wall.
I've heard that from so many people.
But I remember seeing the film clips of it, the people smashing it with the sledgehammers and rocking it and pushing through because remember when I was growing up, there was 2 Germanys. Yeah. Literally.
And really, that was the end of an era, too, because W was the last of his generation to be president. Yeah, and then we had the first boomer president with Clinton.
Yeah, with Clinton. And I remember all the things going on with him.
I'm going to say when he became president...
playing basketball at the University of Arkansas, playing the saxophone. I did not inhale.
He actually did the... I remember he was on Arsenio Hall playing sax.
Yeah, I remember
that. And
I
had my encounter with him. My friend Rob and I went to a Pirates game, and we're still alive, because we looked down, and it looks like candidate Clinton.
Yeah.
Rob's got to be Rob. Let's go down, say hi. Let's go down. I don't want to go down there. We go by... Secret Service, the guards they have. We go see him. He signs our tickets. Huh. And Rob talks to me, says, Governor, good luck. Which, coming from Mr. Republican, was a nice thing. He looks at me. I have my Georgetown shirt on. It's like, I like your shirt. Because I think he went there for a while.
I think he did a cup of coffee there. And then he was actually, don't forget, a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah.
He actually was a Rhodes Scholar.
Dusty Rhodes?
Yes.
Wow, that was good. I never saw him do the flying elbow, though. Never taught that one.
No, he was sick that day. Yeah,
I remember
he did not have sex with that inhaling flying elbow. I think that's when really the country, we had hyper-partisanship started. It became crazy, like with Newt Gingrich, with him. Ooh. Everybody's like screaming at each other. And the thing I remember too is I pretty much blank on TV in the 90s. There was a lot of those sketch shows.
I know.
Mad TV, In Living Color.
I have a hatred of the show Friends, and nobody should hate a show as much as
I dislike the show Friends. I dislike the show Seinfeld.
Did not like Roseanne.
No,
Seinfeld
never liked Roseanne.
Sort of there. I don't hate it as much as you do, but I never really even cared.
No, I don't think it's funny, and I piss off a lot of people, and I don't care.
Well, I had people. You didn't like that?
Yeah, it's like I'm all of a sudden, the next coming of Genghis Khan because I didn't like Seinfeld.
All I really liked was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well,
and I was talking about this yesterday with Buffy herself almost about how a lot of people really didn't. Remember, that was on was it 18? It was the WB.
The WB.
Remember the joke from Jay and Silent Bob? Doesn't anybody watch the WB? It was like Dawson's Creek.
It's the Dawson.
The Dawson. And it was Gilmore Girls. But I watched Buffy. I would pretty much, because I was so busy with work, grad school, everything else sowing my wild oats or whatever, my toasted oats.
My sister is younger than I am. She grew up watching the Gilmore Girls, Will and Grace, things like that.
And I think that's really when TV
don't forget,
political too.
1989 was the debut of The Simpsons.
And it's still on.
Still on.
And I still know this because we had somebody named Bart Simpson. We had parties in his dorm room. They're still on.
Yes, it is.
Because they came out of the Tracy Ullman show.
The Tracy Ullman show, and it was December of 1989 was the first airing of the first Simpsons episode
But now you
ever.
start school and everything like in the 90s. What was it like? Because did you have computers?
Not many. There was a couple here and there. Mainly, we went to the library and looked at books.
What are they?
Yeah. And I remember when I was teaching, 10, 12 years ago, took kids to the library to do research for a project, everybody sat down on the computer. I'm like, no, damn it.
Well, you remember back in the day, the good old infamous microfiche, which I had tons of problems with.
I remember microfiche.
And good old looking up the card catalog.
And when we finally got the computer, it was the orange blinking cursor, and you typed in what book you were looking for, and it's like, it is in this section.
And I remember for college even having to type my papers.
Oh, like
does anybody do that nowadays? And is it just...
You got a typewriter?
Yeah. Does anybody do that these days?
No, probably not.
So we go ahead now to like present day more, like the, what do you want to call it, 21st century?
Yeah, the 21st century, the third millennium, whatever you want to call it.
And what would be the difference between millennials, like if you grew up then
well,
and back then?
I've always maintained that what I would consider a millennial is somebody that grew up and had their formative years when technology in the home was a norm. I didn't really use the internet probably until I was 16 or 17, 16 or 17.
I remember those weird
90s.
Commercials in the 90s with that little British girl in the balloon.
Oh, yeah.
And everything. And I remember my first teacher, Dr. Halligan, in the mid-90s saying he would be reading Time and all these things on the World Wide Web. That was my first time I
because that's really... I mean, the internet started coming around in the 80s.
Yeah.
I know the first email was in the early 70s.
Yeah.
Things like that. But it really didn't get to the point where it was in your homes until the 90s.
No, and the cells were those big clunky...
Yeah, and if you were online on AOL, and if somebody needed the phone, you had to log off the internet.
And the one thing we hear from these days now is like comedy's been killed because people are so sensitive these days.
Well, I feel now that the only people that are offended are those looking to get offended.
I think so. It's everything. You could find your crazy...
But and I know this is when we talked about, how about for the older people? You know, like my grandfather. He was on the podcast a while ago with the war stories. Born in 1924, the same year that Jimmy Carter was born.
I actually found a book recently. It's called, actually...
I did too.
It's called, yeah. No, but this one actually, somehow it turned out to relate to this.
Ooh.
It's called Harebrained Tortoise Mind. And it's the idea of quickness. Everything's supposed to be fast these days. Fast.
We want it now.
Fast food. Now. I want this.
Instant
I'm going to look it up. Bip, it's there.
Yeah.
People look stuff up. It's there. Attention span, 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And
that's why you ever notice why shows are on for 7 minutes before a commercial break?
Yeah, exactly.
That's all we got.
And one of the things it talks about decision making, and it says fast is not necessarily better.
No.
For example, this building's on fire. We get out.
Yeah.
Because we're doing it. But we have to decide something. We have a month. You don't have to go, bam, here it is.
Yeah.
You deliberate. As long as you make it on time.
Right.
But people are so, and I think for a lot of older people, and I admit I'm vile for driving, but you get behind that older person who is just not used to the world being so fast.
Yeah.
And yes, I turn pretty much into Mr. High driving or in a line.
Right. But like you look at it, like when my grandfather was born, there was, and in that era, he wasn't born in the hospital. He was born at home. You look at a lot of houses didn't have, some houses didn't have indoor plumbing. There was houses probably didn't have electricity. Nobody had a television.
No. Indoor air and stuff only came within the 40s.
Yeah, not many people had cars. And now he's still alive. And in this era where you have a device you can hold in the palm of your hand where you can talk to somebody in Russia and have it be like they're in the next room.
And then, tisk kids these days. I remember growing up too, finally when you got your first car. You work for it. Yeah. You got a piece of junk. You love that piece of junk.
Well, now is the era of the 16-year-old girl gets a BMW because daddy felt guilty because he was caught banging the babysitter.
Everybody on my block literally got cars as graduation presents.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Well, and it's just, imagine how it must be for them to look at the advancements in technology.
And you get caught with the question where there'll be somebody and they will have no clue about something because they're younger than you. Mm-hmm. Mentioned a band or something, you just think it is common knowledge.
Well, it was a joke. I was at the Record Archive talking to one of the guys there, and he's about maybe a little older than me. And there was a cassette tape sitting on the counter, and there was a pen right next to it. And I said, hey, those two things are related. And there was a younger kid there, and he said, I don't get it.
One of the things
we know how the pen cap
and we have to bring it up because it wasn't a real thing actually in the 90s was grunge.
Well, it was invented by that reporter from Rolling Stone.
It's called hype. What happened was this woman went to Seattle. All this stuff was passé.
Yeah.
It's gone. She just invented it. She invented the terms, the dress. Mm-hmm. And I actually saw Nirvana at Geneseo before they were famous, like 30 people.
Yeah. Oh, my.
But it wasn't even real.
No, that's the thing. This entire music genre
Was
didn't
that what
even
brought
exist.
Starbucks and the whole coffee thing about us?
Yeah, that was when Seattle all of a sudden became the hip place to be.
Well, we're inflicted by hipsters now, though, too. I mean, there used to be... I walked by one bar on Friday night, I drew a goatee.
Yeah, and don't forget, the term hipster was what, back in the 30s?
Yeah.
They were first...
Well, they had the beatniks in the 50s. I look at
Yeah,
them
but
as sort of
hipsters
same.
even predated the beatniks, that use of the term.
You would have the guys like Maynard G. Krebs, I guess, on Dobie Gillis.
Yes.
There was the one weird guy there was, I think, I dreamed one of those shows where he just sit there with the beret looking out into space, and he said something.
Yeah.
Been 2 weeks to hear him.
It's like, life. Oh. Stuff, shit like that.
But what did you see? Did you see a lot of them in college? Like, when you went to college, how was the environment?
It was very... I think I probably caught the tail end of the...
Was it very political when you went to college?
No, it really wasn't. That's why I'm wondering if I caught basically the tail end of the
we were like
quote-unquote normalcy era.
We were caught almost like in a little pocket universe in college because we never really had the politics. Maybe for Gulf War, people tried because they were, we're going to bring back the 60s, but nobody cared. But I remember doing one little protest at U of R, people were protesting, and otherwise, and of course, I never really had a lot of that. I had a couple professors who I won't name, like for grad school, who were a little out there.
Yeah,
I never had like that really.
No, it didn't have the ultra liberal, diehard, everything is my way or get out of my class. We didn't really have that, but that seems, that's more the nut job. Overly fringe one way or the other.
I have to say, one of my things now that I was afraid of after the election, if you hated Trump, hated Hillary, loved Trump, loved Hillary, didn't care, didn't know, whatever. When people of college age were traumatized so much because of an election, look, it's a political process. Whoever wins, wins.
Yeah.
And
Let's get on with our lives
these are
for the next 4
adults
years.
who are supposed to be our elite.
This was at the University of Michigan Law School. They were having a safe space with Play-Doh and bubbles so they could find their center, and they took so much flack for being so stupid that they actually removed every trace of it from their website, but it does exist. University of Michigan
And I know
Law
a lot
School.
of great millennials, but I always wonder, is it the state we think kids are going to break? Because I remember when I was a kid, it would be, okay, go out to play. Dinner's at 5. I would have friends, parents, you could hear them calling them.
Well, and that's the thing. I've been asked this, is like, was, kidnappings and stuff not existing then? It's like, no, it existed. We just didn't know about
And one
it.
of the
because
things
that's
was-
one thing technology did. It allows us to learn
That's
about
the
more
other thing.
stuff.
I think we have a lot of this goofy news these days because they have to fill spaces.
Yeah.
Because it's 20 for that news cycle. And I remember in the day, stuff would happen. We weren't some pure Eden. It was bad side. We had some weirdos around. I remember them.
It reminds me of the old... And in local news, nothing much happened today, so we drove around in the news van until we ran over a pedestrian.
And I remember we had weirdos looking around. A lot of friends of mine, we used to say stranger danger.
Yeah, stranger danger.
But we never were scared where our parents would watch us on the lawn, no helicopter. We'd have a canal, we'd go play, and we'd go ride bikes.
Yeah, we'd go... Because I lived up on a hilltop, we would ride down to the lower boulevard, hit the gas station, get our Turner's iced tea.
Now they will not drop kids off from the bus stop unless a parent is there. They will wait. They will not pick kids up except for with parents in front of the house. We had to walk 2 blocks.
Come on, uphill both ways.
Well,
driving
it's
snow in March.
When the horses could get through the snow.
Yeah, exactly. When the bison could get
And
through
I know
the
my
snow.
cousin Jimmy, he went to Mooney. He lived within the 2-mile radius. He lived on Bonesteel Street, so he had to walk because his parents were gone. But can you imagine that now?
Oh, God, there'd be grief counselors.
Yeah. It's amazing, though, which gets me like that. And I wonder how kids feel these days because the real world is not.
I think, but the thing to kind of wrap it up, I think the kids
Well, the
today,
only thing I want to add is everybody gets to play, too. That was a weird thing.
Well, that was weird, but I think the kids today are more aware of how the world works.
Yeah.
Which in many ways is very good. But at the same time, it kind of, I feel it may rob them of their childhood innocence and naivety.
Do you think there's a lot of where we get stuck in adolescence these days? People don't want to grow up too many, but there's no childhood.
And that's the problem. I mean, that you're exposed to all this stuff from such a young age that sometimes your childhood does go away. But when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world.
Because I admit I do not like the older person who wants to be a kid. I think that's
I don't
very
like that. I think
unseemly.
you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but you need to grow up, but at the same time, I think you need to grow up, but you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivious to the world. I don't like that. I think you need to grow up, but at the same time, I remember, when I was a kid, we were oblivi we would see things, but we weren't aware of it because we were riding our bikes and digging holes in the yard and burning army men with.
And I mean, not to be like some stuck-up church lady, but some stuff for kids. Let them be kids. Yeah. Let them have their fun. It doesn't last very long, anyways.
Right? Exactly. So, we're all getting thrown into the machine.
That's why Santa came to Little Italy last year, even though I'm still going to go on about that coffee forever, but. He was nice to the kids and everything.
Exactly. And you know what? That proved one thing because you told me about what happened. It proves one thing. No matter how old you are, you still love the fat man in the red suit.
Yeah, and I think that's good for kids. There's still the wonders of that stuff when you're a kid. It's like Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine or something. You'll get the real word soon. You can hate the book.
No, I hated it because I was forced to read it in English.
Well, that's why.
But that's another story for another
But there was fun in those days. And it was like, you don't have to get up and to get counseling and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So what are you going to say about that? It's like, but you wonder what the future holds. It's amazing. We're this little speck.
We're the speck on this big blue marble.
Imagine if you were his pappy's age or my dad's age, how the world's changed for you. They've seen these big wars.
Yeah, he was in the big wars, and now he can see, and now he sees cars that drive themselves.
I think when your grandfather and my dad were born, wasn't there a Confederate left? Like, are Union soldiers still alive?
Oh, God, yeah. He died he's actually buried in Mount Hope Cemetery.
Because there's a saying
the last confirmed Union combat soldier died in, I think, 1958.
It goes in England, 200 miles is a long way. In America, 200 years is a long time. And I think we can be traced back to the beginning of this country, only like 8 or 9 generations.
That's it. But no, like I say, I actually looked up the last confirmed combat veteran for the Union Army and the Confederates in the Civil War, rather, is buried in Mount Hope Cemetery. He's from Victor. Died in, I think, late 1950s, because my dad was alive when he died.
So, and you wonder maybe a couple decades from now how different it'll be.
What did you see not that long ago? The America's oldest man and oldest living combat veteran passed away at 112.
I can go back to one more thing from when I was a kid. There used to be the Dannon yogurt commercials. There's this old guy in some Russian province who was in his 100 something, still farming because he ate yogurt.
Yeah, exactly.
So eat a lot of yogurt.
Eat your yogurt, kids. Sponsored by the yogurt
What is
culture.
the superfood these days?
Are they back on kale?
I don't know. Actually, the Edamame hummus is pretty good.
I like hummus.
I do
Roasted
too.
garlic hummus.
Caramelized onion hummus. I would never a couple decades ago be talking about hummus and doing yoga.
Is it kale?
Kale.
We've heard from off in the distance. It is kale.
We heard a voice.
A voice.
I'm getting old.
Well, on that, we're not sponsored by the Kale Association, so we're not going to talk to them, but we are sponsored by our friends at Upsitnik and Associates Law Firm. Lawyers for you, the people, from Alaska to the Supreme Court, 40 years of helping you. Find them on Facebook, Upsitnik and Associates. Find them on the interweb, upsitnikslaw.com. I guess for the carnival, do you want to be Statler or Waldorf?
Waldorf, I guess.
I can't remember which was which, but he's Waldorf, I'm Statler.
And we were
This
talking
was the
about our
generations,
generations, I
talking
guess.
about our generation without looking at inappropriate
Or the
pictures of
weirdo
small
guy,
children.
yeah. He was doing it to see how
He was
his
doing
son
it for
could
research.
do it.
Not slanderous because it actually happened.
Yes.
So, Rob, you got anything else?
That's all, I guess. And get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn, kids, and quit playing on that sheet metal, and we will see you next week.
Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn.